This story is titled, My Ex-Wife and Her Boyfriend Laughed During Our Divorce, until the judge's final decision wiped the smiles off their faces. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey Reddit, I, 32 male, really need to get this whole thing off my chest. It's about my divorce, and honestly, it's been eating at me for a while now. I've been working as a mechanic for the past 10 years, started right after finishing tech school. I work at this pretty well-known shop in town, or I should say I used to work there. But more on that later. Been fixing cars since I was 16, learning from my uncle in his garage. After tech school, I got my certifications and everything. Lots of people think being a mechanic is just like changing oil and stuff, but there's way more to it. These days, cars are basically computers on wheels, and you gotta know your stuff. It's honest work, and it pays the bills. Most importantly, I love it. I met Sarah, not her real name obviously, about 7 years ago when she brought her car in for repairs. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs from that first day. She kept going on about how her car was premium and needed special attention. I remember thinking she was kind of stuck up, but man, when she smiled at me, I just forgot all about that. She worked at this fancy marketing company downtown, always wearing these expensive suits and carrying designer bags I couldn't even pronounce the names of. I'm not gonna lie, at first, I felt pretty lucky that someone like her would even look at someone like me. I was making good money, but I still came home every day with grease under my nails, you know? We started dating, and things were actually pretty good at first. She seemed interested in what I did, asking questions about cars and stuff. Sometimes she'd bring lunch to the shop, and my coworkers would joke about how I managed to land such a classy girlfriend. I thought she was different from the typical corporate type who looks down on blue-collar workers. Despite our differences, I thought we had something special. She used to tell me how much she admired my work ethic and how she loved that I followed my passion. After about 2 years of dating, we got married, had this decent-sized wedding that her parents mostly paid for, though I pitched in what I could. Her dad seemed okay with me at first. He's this big-shot real estate developer, but he acted like he respected that I worked with my hands. That's probably why he agreed to co-sign the loan for my house. Yeah, I bought the house before we got married. Had been saving up for years, living in this tiny apartment, putting away every extra dollar I made from side jobs. The house wasn't anything fancy. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, decent yard. But it was in a good neighborhood, and I was proud that I could afford it. Her dad co-signing helped me get a better interest rate, but I made every single payment myself. Never missed one. Sarah acted excited about the house at first, talking about how we could fix it up together and make it our own. But then she started making these little comments. Like when her co-workers would come over, which wasn't often. She'd say stuff like, "We're planning to move to a better neighborhood soon," or "This is just our starter home." Made me feel like what I'd worked so hard for wasn't good enough. I noticed pretty quick that she didn't like telling people what I did for a living. At her office parties, when she'd actually bring me, she'd introduce me as a small business owner in the automotive industry. I mean, technically that turned out to be true later, but back then it felt like she was embarrassed to just say I was a mechanic. My sister Jenny saw through Sarah from the beginning. She'd come by the shop sometimes to have her car checked out, and she told me once, "I don't trust the way she looks at you, like you're some project she's working on." I brushed it off because, you know how sisters can be sometimes, always thinking no one's good enough for their brother. The first year of marriage was okay, I guess. We had our routines. I'd work at the shop from 7 to 6, sometimes later if we had a complicated job. Sarah worked 9 to 5, but usually stayed late for client meetings or team building events. Should have paid more attention to those late nights, but I was busy taking these business classes at the community college. Didn't tell her about those because she always made fun of any suggestion I had about improving myself that didn't involve leaving the auto shop. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs. The way she'd wrinkle her nose when I came home with grease stains on my clothes. How she stopped hanging out in the garage when I was working on my project car. The constant suggestions about going back to school to get a real career. But you know what they say about hindsight and all that. Things really started going sideways about 2 years into our marriage. Sarah got promoted at her marketing firm, and that's when she became absolutely unbearable. She'd come home talking about these fancy client dinners and office events, always mentioning this guy Mark who helped her so much with the promotion. I remember this one night specifically. She came home super late, like 11 p.m., wearing this new dress I'd never seen before. When I asked about it, She said the office had an emergency client meeting, and she had to go shopping for appropriate clothes. Made me feel like an idiot for even asking. That's around the time she started making these weird comments about the house. My father-in-law, remember he co-signed the loan, would come over for dinner, and they'd talk about property values and how I was holding Sarah back by not wanting to move to a fancier neighborhood, like right in front of me at our dinner table. She'd just sit there nodding along while he talked about how his signature on the loan meant he had some say in what happened to the place. The worst part was how she started treating my job. One time, this rich client brought in his Ferrari for repairs. Most shops in town wouldn't touch it, but I've got certifications for luxury cars. Sarah actually told her friends I was playing around with expensive toys instead of focusing on a real career. Meanwhile, I was making bank on these specialty repairs, but she never bothered to ask about that part. I used to laugh it off, but then it started to bother me. Then came the work parties. Man, those were rough. There was this one event, some fancy Christmas party at this expensive hotel downtown. I spent good money on a nice suit, so I'd fit in with her crowd. The whole night, she kept leaving me alone while she hung out with her work friends. Her office crowd was something else. All these guys in expensive suits talking about their investment portfolios and vacation homes. One dude actually asked me if I knew any reliable mechanics right after Sarah introduced me as her husband. She just laughed it off while I stood there feeling like a complete outsider. The distance between us only grew after that party. We used to at least eat dinner together most nights, but now she was working late more and more. When she was home, she seemed distracted, always checking her phone or laptop. I tried suggesting date nights or weekend trips like we used to do, but there was always some work emergency or client meeting that got in the way. I started noticing she was texting constantly, always keeping her phone face down, walking out of rooms to take calls. Classic stuff, right? But I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. I mean, she was a marketing executive now. Obviously, she'd have lots of work calls. The real problem started when her brother got involved. This guy was always a piece of work. Brought his car to my shop once and expected me to fix it for free because we were family. When I told him he'd have to pay like everyone else, he went crying to Sarah about how I was being difficult. She sided with him, saying I should help family out since I was just doing simple car repairs anyway. My father-in-law got worse too. Started showing up at my shop unannounced, asking about my finances, wanting to see paperwork for the house payments. Said he was protecting his investment since his name was on the loan. Never mind that I'd never missed a single payment. I was working late most nights, partly to avoid going home to another argument about my lack of ambition, and partly because of these business classes I was taking. Sarah never asked why I was late, probably thought I was just working on cars. She'd make these snide comments about how I chose Greece over her. The breaking point came during one of her company's summer party. They rented out this fancy rooftop bar, and Sarah insisted I come. Said it would make up for missing the last few office events, which I hadn't actually missed. She just told people I wasn't there. I walked in and saw her standing super close to this tall guy in an expensive suit. Found out later that was her co-worker Mark. The way they jumped apart when they saw me? Well, let's just say I'm not as dumb as Sarah thought I was. I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't have any proof yet. I'm not usually the type to snoop, but after that office party, I couldn't ignore what was happening anymore. I started paying attention to patterns. Every Thursday, she'd stay late at the office, but her car wouldn't be in the office parking lot when I drove by. Then there were the credit card statements. Suddenly, there were all these charges from restaurants I'd never heard of, always for two people, always on Thursdays. When I asked about them, she'd get super defensive and say they were client meetings. Funny how these client meetings always happened at romantic restaurants downtown. One day, I was checking the mail and found this envelope from a jewelry store, one of those fancy places downtown where everything cost more than my first car. Inside was a receipt for a men's watch. My birthday wasn't anywhere close, and Sarah had never bought me jewelry before. She always said it wasn't practical for a mechanic to wear nice things. When I tried to talk to her about all these changes, Sarah turned it around on me, said I was being insecure and controlling, started making these little digs about how I was becoming obsessive and paranoid. Every time I brought up something that didn't add up, she'd get this look on her face, like I was some kid making up stories. The more I pushed, the more she pulled away, spending even more time at the office. It got to the point where I barely recognized the woman I married. But the real proof came from this girl at her office. Let's call her Amy. She came into my shop for an oil change and seemed surprised to see me. Said something like, "Oh, I thought you guys split up already." When I asked what she meant, she told me everyone at the office knew about Sarah and Mark's special lunches. Apparently, they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Amy also mentioned that Sarah had been telling people at work that we were separated and living apart. Meanwhile, I'm still coming home every night to cook dinner, which she never showed up for, and paying all the bills. Found out she'd even taken off her wedding ring at work, saying it didn't match her professional image. It's hard to describe how it feels when your whole life turns out to be a lie. I knew this was coming. Every memory started feeling tainted. Those late nights I'd stayed up waiting, all the times I'd defended her to my family when they said she was changing, even the stupid expensive suit I bought for that Christmas party. I'd been living in this weird parallel universe where I was still trying to save our marriage while she was already telling people it was over. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing how much effort she'd put into making me look like the clueless idiot who couldn't see what was right in front of him. I started gathering evidence, knowing our marriage was already dead, but determined not to let her steamroll me like she'd done with everything else. My buddy, who's a cop, helped me set up a system, documenting dates, times, suspicious charges, screenshots of her location showing she wasn't where she claimed. Each new piece of evidence felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage, but at least now I was the one holding the hammer. They had this whole system worked out. She'd tell me she had weekend marketing conferences, but really she was meeting him at this fancy hotel downtown. Found the receipts for that too. She'd accidentally used our joint card instead of her personal one. Amateur mistake. What really got me was finding screenshots on her laptop of houses they were looking at together. Big fancy places in the expensive part of town. In their messages, they were laughing about how they could afford it once they got rid of dead weight. Pretty sure that was referring to me. My sister Jenny came by the shop one day and found me looking rough. Hadn't been sleeping well, you know. She took one look at all the evidence I'd gathered and said I needed a lawyer. Fast. She knew this guy who specialized in divorces, said he'd handled cases like mine before. I kept going to my business classes through all this, staying late at the shop, working on cars. One night, she actually came home early enough to catch me reviewing some financial documents at the kitchen table. More repair invoices? She asked with that condescending smile of hers. Yeah, just trying to keep track of everything, I said, sliding my business school assignments under the stack of actual shop paperwork. You know how it is with us simple mechanics. She sighed that theatrical sigh of hers. You know, if you'd just let me handle the books like I suggested. I mean, I do have an MBA. Oh, I wouldn't want to burden you with my little shop's problems, I replied, thinking about the business valuation course I just aced. Besides, you're so busy with all those late meetings lately. How was the one tonight, by the way? It was productive, she said, suddenly very interested in her phone. We're working on something big. I bet you are, I muttered, organizing my papers. Well, don't let me keep you from your important executive stuff. I'll just stick to what I know best. She gave me that pitying look I'd grown to hate and walked away. Let her think I was just the dumb mechanic. She didn't know what I'm planning for. And honestly, it's better that way. While she was busy looking down on my profession, I was quietly building something bigger. But the final straw came when I checked our joint savings account and found it nearly empty. She'd transferred almost everything out, leaving just enough to cover the monthly bills. When I confronted her about it, she claimed she was investing in her future. Didn't even try to hide it anymore. That's when I finally called the lawyer. Meeting with the lawyer was eye-opening. He looked through everything I'd gathered and said I had a solid case, especially since our state takes cheating into account during divorce proceedings. He also told me to keep acting normal while he got the paperwork ready. That was probably the hardest part. For 2 weeks, I had to pretend nothing was wrong. Every morning, I'd watch Sarah get ready for work, knowing she was going to see Mark. She'd come home late, and I'd have to listen to her lies about client meetings. Even had to sit through dinner with her parents one night, where they spent the whole time talking about how I needed to sign over part of the house to Sarah for security purposes. The lawyer suggested I get proof of her father's demands about the house. So I started recording our conversations, legal in my state with one-party consent. Got some pretty interesting stuff. Him literally saying, while joking, he'd make my life difficult if I didn't give Sarah what she wanted. Then came the day everything exploded. It was a regular Thursday, Sarah's usual late meeting night. My neighbor from next door called me at the shop. I thought you should know. Sarah just pulled up with some man I've never seen before. They went inside together. I knew exactly who it was. My hands were steady when I drove home. Strange how calm you can be when you finally have to face something you've known was coming. I walked in to find them in the kitchen, Sarah and Mark, his hands on her waist. The look on her face when she saw me standing there. I'll never forget it. Get out, I said quietly. Both of you. Now. Sarah's face went from shocked to angry in a second. This is my house too. You can't just... The house that I paid for? I was still using that calm voice that seemed to make her even more furious. You have 30 minutes to pack a bag and leave. Mark slipped out while Sarah was screaming at me about her rights. She was still yelling when she called her father. 20 minutes later, her dad's SUV came screeching into our driveway, her brother Tommy jumping out before it even stopped. You can't throw my daughter out, her father bellowed, trying to push past me into the house. Tommy was right behind him, puffing up like he was ready for a fight. I held up my phone, already recording. You're both trespassing. I've already called the police. They're on their way. This is my daughter's home. I co-signed the loan. This house is mine, her father shouted, waving a folder of papers in my face. But I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Your daughter's been cheating on me for months, I said, loud enough for the gathering neighbors to hear. I have proof of everything. The hotel receipts, the messages. You really want to do this here? In public? That's when the cops showed up. Guess Sarah's family forgot I had the local PD's number on speed dial after fixing half their fleet. Tommy made one last grab for the door, but stopped cold when he saw the officers walking up. Funny how quickly someone's attitude changes when they realize they're about to catch a breaking and entering charge. The next hour was surprisingly quiet. Sarah packed her bags while the police supervised. Her father and brother stood by their car, looking less confident by the minute. As she walked out, Sarah tried one last time. You'll regret this. You have no idea what you're doing. I just smiled. Actually, for the first time in a long while, I know exactly what I'm doing. The next day, my lawyer filed for divorce. Sarah got served papers at her office. Found out later she made this big scene about it, crying to her coworkers about how cruel I was. Meanwhile, she'd been planning to take half my assets and move in with Mark the whole time. Her lawyer contacted mine, trying to negotiate before things got messy. They offered to let me keep the house if I paid Sarah a huge settlement. The amount they wanted was crazy, like they thought I was hiding money somewhere. My lawyer told them to pound sand. That weekend was wild. Sarah's family started telling everyone who would listen that I was abusive, that I trapped her in a bad marriage, that I was trying to leave her homeless. Some of her friends even posted stuff on social media about me. My sister wanted to respond, but I told her to let them dig their own grave. Sarah tried coming back to the house to get more stuff, but I'd changed the locks. My lawyer said she needed to go through proper channels now. She left this long voicemail about how I was being petty and immature. Pretty rich coming from someone who got caught going through my house with her boyfriend. The next few weeks were a paperwork circus. Their lawyer kept sending these demanding letters, acting like Sarah was entitled to everything because her dad's name was on the loan. They really thought they had me cornered. Even sent this detailed list of everything they wanted. The house, half my savings, my project car, even my tools. Like they were shopping from a catalog or something. The first court date was just a preliminary hearing, but Sarah and her crowd treated it like they'd already won. She showed up with her parents, Mark, and this expensive-looking lawyer who looked like he just walked off a TV show. They were all sitting together, whispering and pointing at me like I was some kind of joke. My lawyer told me to wear my work clothes, not the greasy ones, but my clean shop uniform with my name and certifications on it. Said it would help show I was a working professional, not some lazy bum like they were trying to paint me. Sarah actually laughed when she saw me, told Mark loud enough for everyone to hear that I couldn't even dress properly for court. When Sarah's lawyer started talking about how she supported my career and helped build the business, I thought I was going to lose it. They tried claiming she did the books for the shop, which was completely false. She'd never even looked at my business paperwork. Then they brought up the house. Sarah's dad testified about how he co-signed the loan because I wasn't financially stable enough to get approved on my own. Made it sound like he was doing charity work. My lawyer just sat there taking notes, looking completely calm while they built this whole fake story. The real fun started when they mentioned Mark. Tried to say he was just a work friend who'd been helping Sarah through a difficult time. Meanwhile, my lawyer had printed copies of their text messages, hotel receipts, and photos of them together during times Sarah claimed to be at work conferences. Sarah's mom got up and gave this dramatic speech about how her daughter deserved a better life than being a mechanic's wife, said I was holding Sarah back from her true potential, and that the prenup they wanted us to sign, which I refused, would have protected everyone. The whole time, Mark sat there looking smug. He even brought paperwork showing his salary and bonuses, trying to prove he could provide a better lifestyle. My lawyer just smiled and added the papers to our evidence pile. They had no idea what was coming. During the break, I overheard Mark and Sarah's brother planning how they'd redecorate my house. They were talking about turning my garage workshop into a home gym. Sarah's dad was on the phone with some contractor, already getting quotes for renovations. The weirdest part was when Sarah's lawyer tried claiming she had partial ownership of my tools because she helped select them for the business. My lawyer asked her to name even one specific tool she'd helped choose. She couldn't. Then tried to cover by saying she meant she supported the general tool buying process. The judge actually raised his eyebrows at that one. They also brought up my night classes, but completely twisted it. Said I was neglecting the marriage by going to school instead of spending time with Sarah. Conveniently left out how she was spending those same nights with Mark. At the end of that first day, Sarah's lawyer presented their demands. They wanted the house, claiming her dad's co-signing made it partly theirs. They wanted half of my business assets. Didn't know about those yet. They even wanted my project car, saying Sarah endured years of me working on it, so she deserved compensation. The judge set another court date for the following week. As we were leaving, Sarah's dad tried to corner me in the parking lot, saying we could make this all go away if I just signed over what they wanted. My lawyer got it all on video. The week between court dates was pure torture. I could barely sleep, knowing everything I'd worked for hung in the balance. Sarah's dad's parking lot threat kept replaying in my head, and even though we had it on video, I worried it wouldn't be enough. My lawyer assured me we had a solid plan, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah's team had something else up their sleeve. Every night I'd go down to my workshop and just sit there, looking at all my tools, wondering if this would be the last time I'd see them in my possession. My family tried to keep my spirits up, but they could tell I was a wreck. What Sarah and her family didn't know was that all their pressure was only making me more determined to see this through to the end. When the second court date finally arrived, I felt like I was walking into the ring for the fight of my life. Sarah's team paraded up their witnesses one by one. First, their expert, who'd magically inflated my shop's value without ever stepping foot in it. Then Mark spinning his story about Sarah's emotional struggles with my blue-collar status. And finally, her dad, trying to rewrite history about his role in our lives. The whole time, my lawyer just kept taking notes with this knowing smile, while I sat there thinking about how none of them had any idea what was coming next. The real show started when it was our turn. My lawyer called up my first witness, my old boss from the shop. Sarah's side looked confused. They probably thought he was just going to talk about my work ethic or something. Instead, he pulled out this contract from 6 months ago. Turns out, when he was getting ready to retire, he didn't just hire a manager to replace him. He sold the entire business. To me. I'd been owner of the shop for half a year, but I kept working regular shifts because I loved the actual work. You should have seen their faces. Mark's smug grin disappeared real quick. Sarah's dad stopped his constant whispering to her lawyer. And Sarah? She went completely pale. My lawyer started showing the documentation. Business classes I'd been taking for 2 years to prepare for ownership, the loan I got approved for, without any co-signers, and the shop's financial records. The business was doing great, way better than they thought. Those specialty repairs I did on luxury cars? They brought in serious cash. Then, my lawyer revealed how much the business was actually worth. All those nights Sarah thought I was just fixing cars? I was building something bigger. The shop had contracts with 3 luxury car dealerships, a fleet maintenance deal with a local company, and was about to open a second location. Sarah jumped up and tried to interrupt, saying she should get half the business since we were married when I bought it. That's when my lawyer pulled out the purchase agreement, dated 2 weeks before I found out about her affair, paid for entirely with my own savings, and a business loan in my name only. The judge asked Sarah why, if she was so involved in the business like she claimed, she never knew about the sale. Her lawyer tried to spin some story about me hiding assets, but it didn't work. We had documentation showing she was with Mark on the day I signed the purchase papers. Her dad tried to salvage something by bringing up the house loan again. My lawyer calmly showed that I'd already refinanced it. Got approved easily because of my business income. Sarah's dad wasn't even a co-signer anymore. Did that 2 months ago while they were busy planning how to take everything from me. During the court break, chaos erupted in the hallway. Sarah was screaming at her lawyer, saying he should have investigated my finances better. Mark disappeared completely. Guess finding out his girlfriend wasn't about to get rich changed his plans. Sarah's brother was on his phone, frantically calling someone while their mom tried to calm everyone down. The best part was Sarah's dad. His face was literally red as he yelled at his lawyer about missing the business purchase. Kept saying something about how they should have hired a private investigator. My lawyer caught it all on his phone. Said it might be useful if they tried anything else. When we got back in the courtroom, Sarah's whole attitude changed. Suddenly she was crying, telling the judge how she always believed in my dreams and supported my business goals. Even tried saying she gave up better job opportunities to stay in town and help me succeed. The judge just sat there looking thoroughly unimpressed. Her lawyer tried a new angle, saying Sarah's emotional support was crucial to my business success. Asked for a percentage of the shop's value as compensation for her contributions to its growth. My lawyer responded by playing recordings of her making fun of my work, calling me just a grease monkey, telling Mark how embarrassed she was about my job. Then this random dude in a suit shows up. Turns out Mark sent his own lawyer. This guy starts talking about how Mark had no knowledge of the situation's complexity and wanted to distance himself from any financial discussions. Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. Guess her boyfriend wasn't ready to stick around once he realized she wasn't getting any money. The final ruling was beautiful. Sarah got nothing from the business. Judge said she had no claim to something she didn't even know existed. The house was mine-free and clear. She got to keep her car, which was in her name anyway, and a small amount of support for 3 months to transition. That's it. Sarah completely lost it. Started crying about how unfair everything was, how she'd wasted years with me. The judge actually told her to be quiet, or he'd hold her in contempt. Her mom had to practically drag her out of the courtroom. The aftermath was wild. Sarah's dad tried to spread rumors about me in the business community, but it backfired. Turns out other shop owners already knew I'd bought the place. We worked together in the local business association. Some of them even sent their luxury car clients my way just to rub it in. My shop's reputation actually got better. People loved that the owner still worked on cars himself. Started getting more high-end clients who wanted someone who actually knew what they were doing, not just some businessman who bought a garage. But remember how Mark ran off during the court break? Well, karma came for him too. Turns out his company had strict policies about workplace relationships. Someone, definitely not me, sent their HR department the court documents showing he was involved with Sarah while she was still married. He got demoted and transferred to some tiny branch office 3 states away. Sarah tried to keep her job, but the whole drama destroyed her reputation at work. That client she was handling with Mark? They requested a different team after the scandal. She ended up quitting and tried to sue the company for creating a hostile work environment. That went nowhere fast. And yeah, my shop's doing amazing. Opened that second location I was planning. Hired some great mechanics who actually appreciate the work. Sarah's dad tried to save face in the business community. Went around telling people he mentored me. Tried to take credit for my success. Nobody bought it. Other business owners had seen the court documents where he tried to steal my house. His reputation took a big hit. Apparently, people don't like working with someone who tries to steal from their own son-in-law. And the house she wanted so badly? Just finished renovating it. Added a beautiful new garage that's twice the size of the old one. Sometimes I see her drive by slowly, probably thinking about all the plans she had for the place. Her brother still brings his car to other shops and pays way more for worse service. Last month, I got this long email from Sarah. She wrote about how she regretted her choices and never meant to hurt me. Said she realized Mark wasn't who she thought he was, especially after he took that transfer without even telling her. Wanted to know if we could talk about everything. I never responded. My sister Jenny keeps telling me I should write a book about all this. But right now, I'm too busy running my shops and doing what I love, working on cars. The best revenge? I still wear my work uniform most days. Could wear suits if I wanted to, but I'm damn proud of who I am and what I do. The mechanics respect me more because I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty alongside them. We just landed another major contract, and I was under a car doing an inspection when the clients came to sign the papers. Some of Sarah's friends who used to mock my job now try to get special treatment at my shop. They act like they never made fun of me being a mechanic. I just treat them like any other customer. No need for petty revenge when success speaks for itself. Edit. Holy crap, this really blew up. Thanks for all the support, Reddit. For those asking, yes, I'm still single and no, I'm not looking. Too busy enjoying my drama-free life and growing my business.